and when it's lit up, you can record, or you could press this little button
Awesome.
and stop it.
In New York emit more pollutants per unit of energy generated than coal plants. Okay, that is government information. So I think we have a lot of justification for working on waste and closing down the incinerator. We will be in touch with you. I hope everyone signed in. You may want to check and make sure your email is legible, because we have about 10 people we cannot contact because we can't read their emails. Also, we are now a not-for-profit organization. You can make donations that are tax deductible, and we are a membership organization. We managed to become a 501c3 nonprofit so quickly because we inherited an organization that worked to close down, to fight incinerators in the late 80s and early 90s. So that's why you write a check to CAAN/GCC. There's a can in the back. There's green membership forms, and we hope to build our membership base really fast. And you'll see you can check that you want to volunteer. There's a lot of volunteer opportunities. And finally, tomorrow we have a training at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Glens Falls, right here in Queensbury, from 9 to 12:30 with Neil. And there's about 25 or 28 people coming. The training is on how to create a zero waste plan. And it's more looking at policy and implementation, but even if you just want to implement it for your school or your workplace, you would get something out of it. So if you want to come, please try and see me or someone else from our organization before you leave tonight. So I look forward to this evening. I've been really anticipating it for a while. When we formed our group, Neil immediately said, if you ever want me to come, I will be there. So let's give a warm welcome for Neil. To Neil.
Thank you very much, and if someone could please remind me to take my power cord, because I'm sure I'll forget it. Well, it's a pleasure to be invited here. They said in the newspaper, as I told them, my wife and I are very familiar with the Adirondacks. We're here all the time with our kids, and it's great to have a reunion with Tracy. We're trying to figure out how we met 20 years ago. Probably Detroit, maybe Albany. We'll get that straightened out. What I'd like to do is talk for about 45 minutes. I've got my presentation on a little bit of history, current events, and then what cities and towns can do when they want to get rid of their incinerator, or they don't have an incinerator and want to keep one out. And finally, we'll talk a little bit about Warren and Washington County. The purpose of the workshop training tomorrow is that if you want to get involved in an actual plan for how to transition from the incinerator to a combination of recycling, composting, and reuse, the main thing you'll get from tomorrow's workshop are the key places that have done what you want to see happen here, and the people who help them do it. The technical consultants, some are for-profit consultants, most of them are non-profit consultants. The non-profit consultants charge about 1/3 what the professional consultants cost. And that's because we're mission-driven and we want to see these problems solved for a number of reasons. I won't go into the background of the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. It's an organization I co-founded. It's on the web, all our information. We were founded in 1974 to see if we could put our energy to decentralizing the economy and therefore decentralizing political power in the United States. It seems to be more urgent now than it was then, but at the time we thought it was pretty serious then in 1974, given what was going on. I won't bore you with that history. It's pretty depressing, and we're in a pretty depressing state now. So, let's see if we can go into it. I will stop in about 45 minutes, and I hope we can get good questions, and sometimes the answers to the questions are in the audience as well as the questions. So we'll see if we can connect people and get information out. My personal background is I grew up working in factories, and then got interested in academics, became a professor, hated that, and been involved in garbage ever since. And if there are any students here, if your students study garbage, and you will never be unemployed. I can guarantee it. It's my lesson in 48 years of doing this. Okay. I'm going to breeze through a lot of this stuff. I see people approximately my age, so many of you will remember this. Some of you will be new. And if it is new, send me an email or talk to me later, and I'll give you some references if you want to catch up on some of this history. Okay. I don't have to tell you about World War II, even if you're not my age. You remember the impact of it on our society, and that impact was after the privations of the war period, privations of the previous 12 years of depression, the country exploded, people came back, had kids, roads were built, the suburbs, and the entire nature of our solid waste system changed. Before the war, and even shortly after the war, no one was keeping track of anything. It was just, you found a farm and dug a hole and you had your landfill. Things changed. Many people, and even in the history books today, point out that Rachel Carson's book in 1964-65, Silent Spring, started the environmental consciousness. Well, that's true to a certain extent, but ideas alone never do anything. It's ideas and circumstances that make change. At least that's what I think is the conventional sense of theory of change. And right after her book came out in 64, 65, by the way, people wrote better books on our synthetic environment in the 50s, 60s before her, but nonetheless, it was her book that captured the imagination, which was wonderful, but it captured the imagination because of what was going on. And if you do recall, there were at least three incidences in this time period, 65 to 69, that really galvanized people and scared people. It was the Cleveland River catching on fire. It wasn't the first time, but it was the biggest. It was the inversion in New York City over Thanksgiving, which killed 150 people. Stagnant air filled with all kinds of industrial and consumer pollution. And finally, the Santa Barbara oil spill, which happened, again, I don't remember the months where all these things happened, but for a year at least, we had pictures of birds dripping with tar, and obviously it mobilized things. And I'm going to come back to this theme about ideas and circumstances, because I think we're in a unique circumstance now. I'll just give you one other example. You know about the French Revolution in 1789. Well, many people, many historians, and I feel that the writings of Jean-Jacques Rousseau in the 1750s and 60s were instrumental. Man is born free and everywhere he's enslaved, etc. And he wrote about how to raise a boy and how to raise a girl. If you follow these things, I find them fascinating. Rousseau was the first person in history to write enough about himself that Freud could have done a psychoanalysis of him, because the data was there. Well, the revolution took place 20 years after he wrote, 10 years after he died, so he obviously was not there leading the revolution. But the circumstances of the revolution, the poverty, the Catholic Church, the greed of the aristocracy, bad winter, coalesced to make his ideas pregnant in those particular real circumstances. Things don't happen because of ideas on their own, and things don't happen because of history on their own. It's this magic alchemy that no one can figure out when and what and where it's going to happen, but it happened, and it continues to happen, and hopefully it will happen in the right direction again. Okay, so the environmental consciousness of the country was aroused, possibly more so than now. It's an open question. And the federal laws followed. The Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, the Endangered Species Act all came in at that time. And by 1964, the garbage situation was addressed through our Resource Conservation and Recovery Act of 1974, which basically is the federal law of the land. Happily, federal laws don't impact us at the local level, and that's good. We'll discuss that later, because with the feds you have to meet a common denominator, and you also have those giant corporations that have the veto power that we citizens don't have. So the country was filled with garbage. It was literally dripping with garbage. Landfills were unsanitary. There were no linings. Washington, D.C., open burning in Washington, D.C. until 1968, when unfortunately kids playing in the Kendallsworth dump was surrounded by fire and one kid died. And Lady Bird Johnson stepped in 1968 and said, that's it, and it was closed. And these legacy landfills are still with us. The whole history of landfills in New York State is a PhD dissertation unto itself, which we'll get into a little bit later. But remember, this country, the solid waste just mushroomed. New products, plastic couldn't be recycled. Hybrid products, mixing plastic and cardboard, you couldn't recycle it. And at the same time, there was something called the Vietnam War that enraged people independently. Well, the recycling movement, the anti-Vietnam War movement, really coalesced in California. I won't go into that history, but there's a book, there are writings on this, Cliff and Mary Humphrey, the survival walk from San Diego to Sacramento. At the end of every day, a survival walk to end the war and create peace. At the end of every day where they were marching, they started a recycling center, a drop-off center, as a symbol of what people can do every day to improve the environment and decentralize the economy. At first, these were volunteer drop-off stations, people's backyards. Women played an inordinate role in getting these things started, as they did in the 1910 and 20s when the whole sanitation movement started. Women were the lead, Jane Addams and her coterie of people. And of course, once it became a profession just before World War II, women were kicked out of the profession and told to go back home. And there's this wonderful story, which I must tell you. Penny Wheat, Gainesville, Florida. They were building an incinerator, just like they wanted to stick you with an incinerator. And she was a housewife, homemaker. She testified, they told her to go back. She testified against the incinerator. They told her to go back to her kitchen. She did. She started her campaign, and at the next election, she won more votes than any other county council person in history of that Alachua County. The incinerator was closed, and she formed a committee, and now they have a great program shooting for 75% recycling. They're at about 45. It's the only county in the state that will reach the 75% goal without an incinerator. In Florida, burning garbage counts as recycling, which of course is impossible. Okay, what happened was this was all self-activity, drop-off centers. After Earth Day, within 8 or 9 months, 2,000 to 3,000 drop-off stations were started in urban areas, rural areas, old garages, backyards, as I said. That wasn't enough because people got excited about recycling, and entrepreneurs came in. And all of a sudden, there were scores of non-profit recycling companies that were picking up recyclables from people's households. Finally, by the end of the 70s, these systems were taken over by cities, and they were incorporated into municipal programs. At first, they were add-ons, and everyone said recycling costs too much. But as recycling expanded, cities found that recycling was much cheaper than garbage. And in fact, you may recall when Bloomberg first became mayor of New York City, he canceled garbage, canceled recycling. They did it in Washington, D.C. twice. And Bloomberg looked at the numbers and saw that by canceling recycling, you had to deal with the garbage in another way, and that drove up the cost by $15 million. He went back to recycling. So all of this is happening, and at the same time as these, they weren't hippies. Hippies kind of were relaxed and loved everybody, but these people wanted to do something. They wanted to change history. Not that relaxing and having fun is bad, but this was a different breed of people. And these were entrepreneurs, they were mission-driven activists, etc. And At the same time as this recycling thing was happening in the late 60s, early 70s, the feds and industry decided that this is not a problem. Look at all this garbage, we could burn it and get energy. And we had this, I don't have to tell you because you guys got suckered into it and you're suffering from it now. 300 proposed incinerators in every major population center of the country, city and county, were proposed. About 50 got built because people were pissed and they organized. And the anti-incineration organizers, they were organizing because they didn't want pollution, and the real estate interests of cities were behind them because they didn't want taxes to go up. And when you build an incinerator, taxes go up because it's the most expensive way to get rid of garbage, as it is the most expensive way to get energy. If you have a comment, it's fine.
I agree with you.
Oh, okay, well, that's good. Seriously, if I say I talk very fast, I'm from Brooklyn. If you have a question, raise your hand, we can deal with it right away. If it's a fact question, if not, please wait a little bit for, to ask a long question. So, the anti-incineration people are looking around. We hate incineration, but what are we going to do with it? And there are these recyclers, there are these business people that are making money off of processing and coming up with very good ideas. St. Jude Polymer, not far from here in Frackville, Pennsylvania, started recycling plastics, used plastics into new plastic products in '77. 1960, mid-60s, we had Garden State Paper, the first paper company to make newsprint from newsprint, 100% conversion. And then, a gift from the gods, mini mills. You know, steel mills are gigantic, 300 acres. Well, the mini mills are very, very small. They use 100% recycled metal to make new products. It completely wiped out the Bessemer furnace technology, and now metal recycling in the United States is over 90% because of everywhere in the country you get rid of your metals. This all happened in the 80s, and by 1985, more incinerators were canceled than were being proposed. That's how quickly, from let's say, well, not so quickly, it took about 10 years. But it took 10 years with the feds and the industry doing everything they could to build incinerators. And they lost. They lost 250 times. They won about 50 times. Purple was passed in 1979 to give subsidies to the incinerator. I forget what purple stands for, but we will find out. It was a subsidy to burning garbage. They could charge the electric companies more money, it was a subsidy, and it's happening. Your House representative is proposing a bill right now to do the same thing, to reintroduce subsidies for incineration. The Department of Energy had a $300 million loan program, low-interest loans to build incinerators. EPA had a planning process where you got paid $50,000, $60,000 to plan for an incinerator. Milwaukee turned down the money because they said they studied it, and Madison, excuse me, and we didn't need it, and they took it anyway because they supported their staff, and so they spent another year studying incineration. The money was flowing. When the feds and big business want something to happen, the money flows, and it's a testament to democracy, because the only reason this country doesn't have incinerators all over the place like Europe is because garbage is a local decision, and at the local level, citizens make an impact. We really have very indirect say over the feds, we have a little bit more over the state, but at the local level, we can talk to our person, and there's these women in, it's a small town of Pennsylvania, maybe Bedford, Mississippi, not Mississippi, Massachusetts. The vote was 9-1 to accept the proposal from BFI, a big garbage company, to build an incinerator in this small industrial textile town, and the host, the community, would get to bring their garbage there for free. Hey, it's a great deal. The vote was 9-1 to build the incinerator. In that particular town, you had to vote twice to make it real. Well, in the interim, 2 weeks, there was a woman, I wish I could remember her name. She was a bond trader in Wall Street. She worked, went back and forth. And she looked at the numbers, and she was frightened that the numbers didn't make sense. And every incinerator that gets looked at, the numbers don't make any sense. They need subsidies. And she said, to the city council in front of a packed audience, if you vote for this, I'll never vote for you again, my kids will never vote for you again. The next vote was 9-0 against the incinerator. At the same time, the same thing happened in Duarte, California, a tiny little Latino town that the mayor thought he had made a great deal. They could build 10,000 tons of garbage. All of LA County, all of LA City could get their garbage up there. He made the deal. People showed up, 300 people, it was a very small town. He changed his vote immediately, but at the next election, the entire county, city council and the mayor were voted out because they had originally agreed to the incinerator and the people didn't want to have anything to do with them again. So at the local level, we can kick people around. Now, and we can become city councilors and county commissioners. I don't recommend it. You're more valuable as an organizer, and you don't want to go into debt.
There are some candidates here.
Well, then I encourage, I hope, I wish you well, and many anti-incineration people have made it to Congress. Dr. from Paterson, New Jersey. I'll think of his name. He's there now. Purcell. That's not his name, but Mayor of Paterson, fought the incinerator, medical doctor, fought the incinerator, became mayor, and now represents that area in Congress. The corporate backlash to citizen organizing, you can imagine. And I'll just mention two things. Two, big soda and big waste. Big soda went crazy when Vermont in 1953 passed a bill saying that all beer had to be sold in refillable containers. 53. Within months, Keep America Beautiful was formed. Keep America Beautiful is the mouthpiece of big soda. Do anything but don't pass a bottle bill. And as you know, this goes on regularly. As a matter of fact, one of the best things you could do if you want to stimulate your recycling system is to either propose a bottle bill or propose an incinerator, and then people will get so angry at you, we'll have some good organizing. Now, big waste is more complicated because they have more invested in this. And this is, oh gosh, okay. When REPA was formed, it forced landfills to linings, leachate control, methane control. Who could afford to do that? Cities, your city couldn't afford to do that. All in New York State had to privatize their landfills. It's because the feds deserted us. After the war, sewage treatment became a crisis. And the government started the feds started the sewage treatment program, which is why we have decent sewage now, although it's getting worse. But when it came to landfills, they did nothing, except say you had to improve them, which was good. But it gave no money, it gave no support. Waste Management Inc. and BFI, these brilliant businessmen, they realized we've got it made, we've got the capital, we can do this. They'll all go out of business and we'll become rich, and that's exactly what happened. Right now, Waste Management Inc., BFI, well, BFI is gone, but the two big ones, Allied and Waste Management, there are two other big ones, but they're all eating each other up, so they're all the same. And they control 75% of landfill capacity in the country, 50% of hauling, and now they're trying to monopolize MRFs, processing plants. So the price of processing recyclables, the escape valve from the big mall of big waste, they're trying to close that. There's some very exciting stories how citizens stopped that. If I have time, I'll tell you how they did it in Twin Cities, Minnesota. Very exciting, great financial people, very sophisticated. So, but the biggest thing that Waste Management Inc. did, and I've got to tell you one other story. These people are crooks. They bought up all these other companies, not with money, with stock, with their stock. They didn't have to put out any cash. So what happened was Wall Street said, hey, recycling is going to drive you out of business because every time they recycle something, you lose stuff because we know it belongs in the landfill. But these people don't want it to go to the landfill. Well, in order to keep their stock high, they got involved in fraud. Did you ever hear of a company called Anderson Accounting, Arthur Anderson? Well, they got blown out by Enron, 2004, I believe. Well, in 2000 and 2001, What were they doing? They were phoning up Waste Management 8 books to make their stock look higher so that Wall Street will be happy, more investment, and they'll have more stock to throw out and buy up every mom and pop company. Well, they were found guilty. $600 million they paid. 200 from Arthur Andersen, 400 from Waste Management 8. But the damn feds didn't break up the company. 100 years ago, when the antitrust laws were meaningful in this law, in this country, they're no longer meaningful, they broke up companies. But they let these companies keep their empire, and that's why we're suffering right now. And then, right at that same time, 2000, 2001, single-stream recycling. Single-stream was introduced to cap recycling, to put a limit on recycling, to stop the hemorrhaging from these companies' bottom line. And if you look and go to any textbook, go to your webpage, look at U.S. recycling, 69, beautifully, oh, just like that. Slowly but surely, 5, 6, 10% each year, until, oh, you got mosquitoes up here too. Until the year roughly 2000, 2001, they introduced single stream. What's our recycling rate now? 34.5%. What's it 10 years ago? 34.5%. Complete stagnation. Peter, you read articles all over the place that recycling is stagnating. Recycling isn't stagnating. Cities are stagnating. There are cities that are at 70, 50, 60, 70%, all because of mobilized citizens. LA, San Francisco, Portland, Worcester, Massachusetts. Small towns do even better. They're at 80%, some of them are at 80%. It's all because of citizen organizing and citizen action. And of course, citizens have two sources of power. They vote, and at the local level, your vote is meaningful, and they buy. You have purchasing power and voting power. Voting power is much more powerful, but purchasing power is important. And when I get into markets in a few minutes, you'll see that purchasing power is making corporations change even though when they don't want to. And let me stop and say this. You read about Ford and Pepsi and all these big companies doing good things and letting us know about it, more recycled content, thinner bottles and all that stuff. But all of these companies, where does their money go in the political system? It goes to the big corporations and the right wing. Have you ever heard of ALEC, A-L-E-C? ALEC, I don't know what it stands for, but it's a right-wing cabal that works in every state passing the worst types of laws that we want to live with. Anti-abortion laws, preemption. This city of Glen Falls might decide you want to ban single-use plastics. They'll go to the state and get a preemption. Cities can't do that. Broadband radio, broadband communications. The Institute has documented that when a city or a town owns its broadband, it's cheaper, the technology updates are quicker, and speed of your interactions is quicker. Community-owned broadband is the cheapest way to have broadband. In 20 states, it's illegal for cities to have broadband because they're preempted. That's the nature of these corporations. So when you read that Ford or someone does something good for the environment, ask them where they're sending their political money. And it's all going to the right wing. And it's all going to people who want more plastic, more junk, and we'll talk about that when we get to the end.
So ALEC stands for the American Legislative Exchange.
The American Legislative Exchange, you could look it up and you will be very depressed if you have good values. Okay, the denouement of big waste was, of course, China. The whole recycling system, 34.5%, whatever, is all built on sending junk to China. Junk is recyclables with 30 to 40% contamination. The Chinese, because, won't go there, the Chinese were desperate for raw materials in their economy, so for 10, close to 15 years, they bought it. And they drove up the price. They drove up the price so high that they destroyed our whole domestic recycling capacity in paper and plastic and other things. So over 10, 12 years, the labor costs go up in China, and also the recycling in China of plastic was so primitive that it was polluting. It's called PLOG, plastic fog. It's just destroying people all over the country, and despite the fact that it's a totalitarian dictatorship, if you stay local, you could beat the system. You can stop an incinerator, you can stop plastic pollution. If you go to the next town to organize, you go to jail. Now, what that means is you have to be a better organizer, because in China you have to bring 10,000 people and sit down where they want to build the incinerator. And that will stop the incinerator. But you can't do anything else. You can't broadcast what you've done. So China has to change its tune. In 2013, they tell the whole world what they want to do, are going to do. They call it the green fence, and say in 4 years we're going to do this. In 4 years we've done. The big waste has done nothing. In end of 2017, they announced the national sword, cut off all deliveries of contaminated stuff, and big waste says you can't do this. We need warning. Okay, we need money from the feds to teach people how to recycle. And that's what's happening now. Subsidies going for these education programs. What you need is a program that will help you revert from single stream to dual stream. Or to establish dual stream systems that work. They can work if they're small. Small meaning, I'll get to in a second, 300 to 400 tons per day, which work in Boulder, they work in Twin Cities. But if you build 900 to 1,000 tons per day, they just don't work. You can't get glass, you can't get film plastic. But who cares if you've got a landfill and we get paid 60 to 70%, we make 60 to 70% profit putting stuff in landfill, and recycling we break even. If you're the corporate CEO, what are you going to do? You're going to work on waste. Well, Peter Anderson, a very good friend from the Center for a Competitive Waste Industry, has a proposal. Any company that is basic businesses in landfill should be ineligible to deal with your recycling, because it's a gross conflict of interest. And there's also another part of that called I'll think of the word, but it means everything has to be out in the open.
Transparency.
I'm sorry?
Transparency.
Transparency Act, thank you. Okay, that's our history lesson and our current events lesson. Okay, so where we are is right now. For the most part, cities are the best engines of growth. 1/3 of the waste stream is organic. I'm sorry, so you had a question.
Single stream, dual stream,
Yes.
what is it?
I'm sorry, you're absolutely correct, thank you. Single stream is when you put all your recyclables into one cart. I think you have that here in Glens Falls, because I saw the cellar bin. Dual stream is when you keep your paper separate from your other materials. It's collected at the same time. There are various trucks that do that. The trucks are very effective. The best system I've seen, it's operating in a city in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and a rural area of Center County, Pennsylvania, is you put all your stuff in your bin, not a cart, a bin. The worker takes it over to a truck, and the truck is a series of rotating troughs with segregated or compartmented. And you put the glass there. It's called curbside sort. And what's not recyclable, you bring back to the household, and the household sees that's not recyclable. That's pretty good education to find out that I can't do that anymore. So, single stream and dual stream are keeping the paper separate so it doesn't get contaminated by broken glass and so on and so forth. Some systems want to do glass separate than paper. It's a local decision. And as we'll wind up saying, planning something like this is complicated, and it takes a lot of time, which one thing I'll get to at the very end. There are grants now available to this town to get grants from the DEC, the state, to do compost planning, to do zero waste planning, to do dual stream planning. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. Organics is 1/3 of your waste stream. You compost it, you mulch it, you don't have to send it to China. There are if you do a good job, there are year-round markets for compost. You burn garbage, every 10,000 tons you get one job, you compost it, you get 6 jobs. But once the finished compost goes out into the industry, your gardening stores, your landscaping stores, hundreds of jobs are created. And that goes with other materials. Glass. The big companies cannot recycle glass. They get the glass out, it's in such poor shape, the glass companies can't take it because they would have to pay too much to clean it up. So the glass goes into a landfill. It's called recycling, but it goes into a landfill. Okay. The glass industry is bending over backwards to set up rail haul because they need the glass. The glass companies process the glass for insulation, new bottles, sandblasting, and insulation. They can't get enough of it, and if they don't get enough of it, their customers will have to lay off people. So glass recycling is homegrown. You can recycle glass as much as you want. If you make a mistake, it turns into sand. And you've got one here in the Marine Terminal, just south of Albany. I think it's in Queens, thank you. Is a terrific, they get New York City bottle glass, they crush it up, and they sell it to the sandblasting industry. Very, very good technology. Now, when it comes to paper, I won't go over it, but recycling paper in the United States was driven out of business by the decade of phony high prices that the Chinese were paying. The Chinese were outbidding each other. One Chinese company would outbid the other. It was silly. But right now, because of what's happened in China, there's more investment in recycled paper production than ever before in the United States. 17 mills are under construction in every part of the country because the price of recycled paper went down. The investors realized, hey, our raw material just dropped by 70%. We can now make paper and make a profit. Paper, cardboard, boxes, etc. Same thing is happening in plastic. There are plastic processes, even for low-grade plastics. 1 and 2 plastics, PET and HDPE have markets, and will have markets forever. But more and more companies are investing in low-grade plastics, and they're popping up all over the place. And I'll say this, if you read the media, and even some of the trade journals, they'll tell you, nobody wants U.S. recyclables. It's just not true. Everybody is scrambling to get our stuff, but they want it clean. So the Chinese are setting up their own mills here to pulp the paper and send it back to their home countries. It's imperialism. It's exactly what we did and what the British did for the last several hundred years. Get the low-grade stuff here, bring it home, manufacture it, and then sell it at high prices here. It's classic. Okay. Everybody wants U.S. waste, and the alarm that the Chinese set off was quite wonderful because we're cleaning up our mess. Now, we're going to talk about this tomorrow, but your haulers and your processors can be your best friends if they're local. I'll give you an example. Nelson Wydell, a composter, started a composting plant in Wilmington, Delaware, 300 tons per day. It was going very well on 21 acres. Nobody complained about anything. He needed some cash. He made a mistake of letting Waste Management invest. They took over. They immediately tried to scale it to 600 tons per day. It just didn't work. It started to stink, and the plant was closed down by the state. Did Waste Management try to clean it up? No, they were just very happy. The compost, the organics, is now going to flow to our landfills. So this is the type of thing we're up against, and it happens in every industry because the country is run by monopolies. The point here is that you can get a processor and you can get a hauler and you can write contracts that guarantees everybody a profit and guarantees the community good, reliable, and cost-effective systems if it's kept local. And again, we have to define local, which we'll do in a minute. The pot of gold at the end of the garbage rainbow is to have clean recyclables coming out of your business and households and having local companies processing it and manufacturing it. It's called a resource, there are two names for it, Resource Recovery Park, or Californians, a little bit different, call it RMDZ, Recycling Market Development Zone. 2 cities are now building these, Austin, Texas, and our friend Penny Wheat, they're building one in Alachua County, where Gainesville is. The Californians started this 20 years ago. These are industrial parks only for recycling, composting, reuse companies. And in California, if you're located in one of these zones, there are 40 of them in rural and urban areas. You get low-interest loans from the state, you get reduced taxes on your purchases, and reduced energy taxes, technical assistance for marketing, and technical assistance for your equipment. That's the most comprehensive way for state and local to work together through these. And right here, you need one. You need a regional industrial park. It's the only thing probably you need. Well, you need a regional landfill and a regional industrial park. Everything else stays in your hometown. You don't need energy, you don't need to transfer materials from one place to the other to get them processed. Okay, how do you localize your things? I already said that the scale of your facility is important, it has to fit, and the owner is important. That is why in Boulder and Twin Cities, where you have great programs and the system is controlled by the county, the cities, and the mission-driven nonprofits, they're mission-driven, they want to recycle. And those are the people you want in charge of your recycling program. You don't want the big waste haulers. Single stream can work, dual stream is better, because when you have dual stream, you don't need big processing, because the material comes in already separated. So you need some separating, you need crushers, etc., but you don't need these big conveyor lines with people picking. The jobs are terrible. If robots come in, that's a good thing, because these are jobs that people shouldn't be doing. They're terrible jobs. They pay terribly, except for cities that have $15 an hour minimum wage, and some cities like Baltimore and Los Angeles have living wage bills, which approximate about $15 an hour plus health insurance. And, okay, I won't go into
And
all.
they're very dangerous jobs.
They're dangerous because you're breathing garbage, you're breathing air stirred around with garbage. You know what you throw in your garbage can. Even if we're careful, things get mixed up.
Yeah, a man was killed in the facility in Albany last year.
Yes, and just 3 weeks ago, someone was killed, a piece of it in our neighborhood in Montgomery County. A piece of equipment fell over and crushed the poor young lady. These are not good jobs, and if you have single stream, if you have dual stream, you reduce the danger and you reduce the cost of processing. In addition to getting a good recycling system, you need a few other things, because we're dealing with industry that doesn't care about us and doesn't care about the earth. You can ban things from your landfill. Vermont and Wisconsin have done that. You can't throw anything that's recyclable or compostable in the landfill in those two states. The best advice I can give you is for your county or your region to buy a landfill and put it on a diet. Literally put a cop there, and it's been done. You need police enforcement to make sure that haulers and individuals bring in things in the right way and don't mess up the place when they get inside. Bottle bills, of course, are terrific. I don't have to go into that. You guys have a bottle bill here. It could be improved. It could provide very heavy, in my opinion, very heavy taxes on single-use bottles. We need to get back to refillables. It's the only zero waste approach. And if you get back to refillables, you do something that's such a blessing for the environment. You get rid of the aluminum soda and beer can. The aluminum can is an environmental disaster. From bringing up the bauxite from Africa and Jamaica to the energy. The industry wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the United States subsidizing the electricity. The TVA and the Bonneville system out there, they're all $30, $40 billion in debt because they're providing low interest, low cost electricity to make a can that you use and throw away in 10 seconds. It's insane. Plus, everyone loves aluminum recycling. It's a joke. Aluminum recycling is one of the dirtiest businesses you can get into. 25% of an aluminum can, when you put it through all their processes, comes out what's called an aluminum dross. It's 4 heavily hazardous chemicals all mixed together. Very volatile. When you walk through a facility, you have to wear thick rubber boots because your shoes will be eaten up in one day. Now, this is very caustic stuff, but we know how to precipitate it out and get 4 good chemicals, but the industry doesn't want to do it because at the time, this goes back 15 years, it would cost about 3 cents a pound to process it. Industry didn't want to do it, so they just fill up farms in Wabash, Indiana with billions and billions of tons of this aluminum dross. So getting rid of the aluminum can, if we're going to get to sustainability, there are not going to be any aluminum cans in the world. Now, obviously, we're going to use aluminum, but we're going to use aluminum for things that make sense, not for soda cans. Okay, the next thing you could do is unit pricing. And I'm not going to get to everything, but there's plenty of time tomorrow. But unit pricing is very, very important. It says you're going to pay for your garbage based on how much you put out on the curb. You're not going to pay for what you put out in recyclables. You're not going to pay for your organics. We're going to encourage you and maybe give you a little tax break to compost in your backyard, because then 15% of your waste just disappears forever, and you have some compost for your garden, or for your neighbor's garden if you don't like that. Unit pricing, and we'll talk about this tomorrow because I can tell you what excellent people to come here and help you. They're helping a lot of groups in the country get to unit pricing. Within 1 year of unit pricing in this city, you will reduce your waste stream by 40%. And that's a combination of more recycling, because it's free, more composting, and changed purchasing habits. It's called source reduction. You're not going to go to a store and bring something in your house that you're going to have to pay to put out on the street. You're going to change your habits. So that combination, and this 40% figure has been hit time and time again. Hundreds of cities, there are over 2,000 cities that have pay-as-you-throw working the right way. There are another 5,000 that have differentials between recycling and garbage, but the differentials are so small they don't motivate people. You need to have a significant differential. The first pay-as-you-throw system in Fresno years ago, they had a $5 a month differential. It didn't mean a thing. Seattle then tried it. It was a $9 differential. That started people moving. And then when they got to a $17 differential per month, people started recycling very seriously. Okay, capital accumulation. You need investment capital. There are so many different ways to get it. Creative cities have put a surcharge on garbage. Alameda County, every ton of garbage that goes into the ground or an incinerator in Alameda County, although there are no more incinerators in Alameda County, they added a surcharge. Originally it was $6, now I think it's $10 or even higher. It yields $10 million a year for Alameda County, where Berkeley and Oakland are, to invest in private, community, and government recycling programs. And they now have they're at least at 60% recycling. Those surcharges have been used all across the country. Bonds. How did you get your incinerator? Well, you got your incinerator probably back then $200, $300 million, probably more. And there was manipulation. They got the bond credit, they get all the nonprofits, and they sold it to the for-profits so they could get more tax. It's a joke. It's not a joke, it's tragic. And in fact, what did Marx say? First time around it's tragic, the second time it's a farce. Well, your incinerator is a farce. And it's happened 50 or 60 times already, so we can document that it's a farce. Because in every battle I've been in, I've been in about 30, the citizens had it right. In Carroll and Frederick County, Maryland, the citizens acquired the skills of an accountant and showed the public, because the county commissioners wouldn't listen. And finally, after the citizens said, look, we're losing a fortune here, Carroll County paid $3 million to get out of the contract after the citizens showed them. And it turns out that the county commissioners didn't even read the contract. They just took it straight from the corporations. Okay, the environmental bonds, there's a new form of environmental bonds that you could use. You could use traditional bonds, but there's so much money floating around. If you want to do something and you're organized, you can get the funding you want, you can get the financing you want. Combination, as they did in the Twin Cities, combination of nonprofit money and investor. The investors in Twin Cities were the paper mills that wanted the paper. So that company is getting paid back in the paper for making their investment. Okay, let's talk, I'm going to only talk a few minutes about.
Can I ask one question?
Please,
One
sir,
question
yes.
about what you were just talking about. So,
Please.
I mean, Warren County has 66,000 residents. It's a small county.
Yes.
So what's the best option for them? Obviously, taxing trash is not going to raise that much money.
What's the question, please?
What is the best way that you found for smaller cities or counties to raise capital?
Well, I'm saying there are three options: a surcharge, issue bonds, or actually there are four: grants from the state.
Okay, so grants, but because a surcharge really wouldn't work in a tiny.
Well, I don't understand.
why wouldn't it?
Oh, it would be limited in what it raises per year. I mean, if you're not using the
Yeah,
trash
but
that the
what-
twin cities are.
What town are we talking about? A town
There
of
are only
66,000?
66,000 people.
You don't need that much money.
What's that?
You don't need that much money to finance a system, and you're paying $69 a ton, or thereabouts, no one knows what the,
Well, I got you that.
oh,
number.
what is the
It was,
final?
it was around 70 per
Okay.
ton.
You're paying more than people outside this region, because your people signed on the dotted line.
Well, no, it's no longer the case, but
Oh.
actually the rate went up,
Okay.
from what it
Let
was.
me-
Yes.
Let me back up and say, in order to answer your questions, to tell you exactly what to do,
No, I
it
mean-
needs a lot, it needs.
Yeah, I wasn't asking for
And
exactly.
as I told Tracy, the people in Montgomery County hired us for $2,000 to come up with a zero waste scenario. And now that scenario is being used for consultants to actually put the final numbers on. Montgomery County has 1 million people. Between the two counties, you probably have 120,000, 130,000 people.
Exactly.
Your system is very, very manageable. All of these tactics I mentioned are possible. Which ones are the best? I or someone, and I'm not offering myself, but I'll tell you, I would suggest you work with Ruth Abbey and Gary Listen. In fact, if you have a citizens committee that wants to do a plan for the two counties, I would write a proposal. 3 counties is, oh, okay.
If we could.
Whatever, I thought we, I said Warren and Washington because you two
Yeah.
own the incinerator,
We
but
did.
it could,
Well, we usually send the pollution over to Saratoga.
Actually,
we're rich people.
Saratoga was sending more garbage to the incinerator than Warren or Washington combined about 5 years ago, so.
It happens all over. DC, we're inundated with waste, the waste management and Ally that bring into the city. They use our transfer station at 1/3 of the cost because the mayor made a big deal with them so you can get a better job after you price. All of these are the realities, but, so we need to take the smorgasbord of strategies and then dig down into the weeds and give you a plan. It's not going to happen tonight, and it's not going to happen tomorrow. But tomorrow, I'll introduce you to the people who can do it with you. Organized citizens are a must. If you leave consultants to their own, they'll do the easiest thing. But you don't want them to do the easiest thing. You want them to do the right thing. Okay, let me end because, well, I'll tell you this. The first thing you do in a zero waste plan, and we'll also tomorrow talk about zero waste. It's a term that can hurt as well as help. But I prefer to say minimize waste, but nonetheless, you need what's called a voids analysis. Look at the city that's doing the best, in your opinion. LA, Gainesville is a relatively small city. And what are they doing that we don't have here? Well, is there a reuse center here where people can bring in their appliances to be fixed and sold again? Mattresses, these exist all over. Mattresses, appliances, cars, furniture, textiles. Textiles is 6% of the waste stream. It causes the most, among the materials that go into the landfill, more energy and pollution is wasted because textiles aren't reused. A report is coming out this week, which I'll send you. The report was done on Washington, D.C., and you'd be amazed, one, at how polluting textiles are, but secondly, you'll be amazed at what's happening. St. Vincent de Paul in Lane County, they just hired a fashion designer to take all their old clothes coming in and redesign them, and they have a line of clothing. This is a nonprofit social service organization, Lane County, Oregon. 600 jobs, they repair things, they bring the repair things for sale up to Portland, Oregon, or San Francisco, and their trucks come back with things that need to be repaired. They get repaired and they get sent out again. 600 jobs. Since the Depression of 2008-9, they've hired 120 people and raised wages. And if you're talking about job intensity, taking apart computers, every 10,000 tons, over 300 jobs. And I'm going to stop here and make this one last point. Recycling is more than garbage, and it's more than the economics. There are 2 companies that number of companies you should look at. Homeboy Enterprises in LA and Recycle Force in Indianapolis. These are companies that deconstruct computers. If they can repair them and sell them at pennies on the dollar. If they can't repair them, they recover usable parts that they sell pennies on the dollar. If they can't get a usable part that's working, they break down the alloys. There are 8 different types of aluminum alloys in a computer. If you mix them all together, you get the lowest price. If you train someone at a desk to keep them separate, you get the best price. Well, the main thing about these things is that the workers are coming out of prison, formerly incarcerated. The recidivism rate, which is a threat and a plague on all of us, in recycle force, it went from 76% to 26%. In Baltimore, where they're doing the same thing, not with computers, they're doing it with buildings, building deconstruction, taking apart buildings with respect for these materials so that everything that's possible is reused. The floorboards, a gymnasium floor is worth $10,000 if you have the right equipment and training to scoop it up, and so on and so forth. Humana, the name of this one group, they processed over 300 workers, they have 90 working now. The recidivism rate in the last 3 years, 0. That's because the wages are decent, they're not great wages, 15, a little bit more, but health insurance. And these are mission-driven organizations. The other one that has very low, if no, recidivism is Second Chance. Second Chance, we help get them started. We train their first 6 deconstruction workers in 2003. They now have 170. All of that growth came from people on the TANF rolls, the welfare rolls. So they've created 150, 160 jobs for people who are going nowhere, got them health insurance, and every year they have a goal that 20% of their workers find a better job. And that's what the social impact of what we're doing. And if stupidly, cities and counties and states sign contracts with the OEMs, the original equipment manufacturers, the big computer companies. What do they do when they get their stuff? They shred it and get the metal. They get the lowest possible value because all they want to do is get it out of the consumer heads, and everybody goes buys a new computer. So I fight this battle, and in fact, city council people no longer talk to me in DC because I keep telling them that they're throwing lives away by giving all this stuff to these big companies. Okay, I'm going to conclude now because I'm actually 5 minutes over. But let me just say, ideas and circumstances, which I mentioned earlier. Who knows that magic alchemy, how things get started. But we're in a time now where consciousness is just about the highest you can get. The earth is burning up. My friend Charlie Moore, the captain who discovered the plastic gyres 10, 15 years ago, he wrote a book called Plastic Ocean. I just had a conversation with him. We talk all the time. And he was telling me what's happening with plastic going all over the fish. And his next book should be Plastic People. Because it's all over us. Every part of our body has some plastic in it.
It's in us already.
Yeah, it's in us. You go to the Himalayas, the highest peak, you go to the deepest crevice in the ocean, there's plastic. We have consciousness. The world is awake. And we have to mobilize now if we want the ideas and the actions to come together like they did in the 60s with our new environmental consciousness. This is beyond environment. This is survival. And I'm sure you guys read The Given and many of the other writers and scientists, and we're in a lot of trouble. And we need to mobilize. Garbage may be mundane, but we all do it every day. Everything that becomes garbage these are the best recycling tools in the world, better than a robot. And we have to organize and make it real here, make it real in our region, in our state, and ultimately in our country. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you, and thank Tracy for inviting me. It was an invitation I couldn't refuse. Questions? Sir?
I lived in Germany for 3 years, and we actually had 3 different recycling requirements, and they inspected your garbage, and if you had garbage in there, you got fined. I mean, you have recycling in there, you got,
Yep.
fine. Can you talk any more about Europe and
Yes.
what we can borrow or steal from them?
Yes, Germany, we've taken something from them, it's called an extended producer responsibility, which is a disaster. It's not working for them and it's gonna be bad for us. I can explain that perhaps, if you could be there tomorrow, I'd explain it because it's a long explanation. I'd rather give you a short answer. The Italians are doing great, they're anarchists. The Japanese are doing great. I don't know much about what their motivation is. I have a lot of Italian friends. The Italians have 8 separations, the Japanese and so on. And Scott, who lived in Japan, we were just talking about that. Those are the models, Japan and Italy. And I point out that the Italians are recycling because of the Goldman Prize winner, whose name I can't remember, a school teacher who stood up to the mafia who wanted to build incinerators. And he captured the attention of the whole country, won the Goldman Prize, and he turned Italy. There's no more, they're not building any more incinerators, and they're recycling and composting like crazy. Paul Connett, who comes from this part of the country, actually he's English, but he's lived here and was a professor up in
St. Lawrence County.
St. Lawrence College.
In St. Lawrence County.
Yeah, St. Lawrence County. If you ever get a chance to hear Paul, go listen to him because he's terrific on the numbers, the scientist, he's a trained chemist, but he's also incredibly funny.
Yes.
You will, and if you ever hear him talk, and he doesn't sing his anti-incineration song, ask him to sing. I'm telling you, it's a #1 in my book.
Repeat his name?
Paul Connett, C-O-N-N-E-T-T. I bet if you go up on the internet, you can get him singing. Actually, we have him singing on one of our podcasts. You can go to our page, I'll tell you how to get there.
He did
but-
a Monty Python routine.
But, sir, we don't need people to have 8 separations. We need people to have 2 separations. And with economic incentives and education, which I didn't talk about, the only education that's really important is the kids in school. And in fact, I'll tell you this, when my daughter was young, we had an event, a rock and roll song about recycling, and B.B. King volunteered his time to be, one of the superstars. And my daughter, who was 8 or 9 at the time, asked him, while sitting on his lap, why he volunteered his time. And he said, my kids told me it's about recycling. I didn't have a choice. And that's what we need. And the recycling educators are sensational. Every class has a lesson plan. You couldn't ask for more. I believe.
What's your podcast?
I will give that information to Tracy.
I'll
But
send it out.
if you go up to ilsr.org and click on Waste to Wealth, you'll scroll down and you'll see it. But if you leave me your name, I'll make sure you get the right URL for it.
And could you give just several concrete examples of how you think to educate kids? Do you think it's in the curriculum?
It has to be the curriculum, and it's not a recycling curriculum.
So get it in the standards?
You use math. 500 pounds is a quarter of a ton. Geography, political science, social studies. You use what you want to teach. You want to teach STEM? Fine, use recycling examples. But also bring recycling in to the classroom. You've probably never heard of Mary Applehoff. Mary Applehoff is an angel. I hope she's in heaven right now, because she passed away a few years ago. She was a school teacher in Kalamazoo. She started bringing compost material, banana peels, into her classroom. The kids went wild. She wrote a book, which made her famous, called Worms Eat My Garbage.
Oh, yeah.
And she had to write a sequel, Worms Eat More of My Garbage. Lesson plans all over the place for composting. The Oregon Environmental Education Society, they've been doing this for 50 years. The materials are there. You just need to get the teacher and everyone together. And also in DC, the only schools that recycle are because the kids started. And that we have 200 schools, only about 15 are doing it. And it's the law, which means you need more than the law, you need organizing. Miss, you had a, yeah.
I think there's something else about Germany, which is that they require industrial producers to make their items easy to fix. Can you just address like the?
Yes.
I mean, there's
to repair law in several states, at least 20 states. I believe it's about to pass in New York State. It says that Apple and Deere, the farm equipment, they have to sell you or give you the books. They have to give it to businesses that are in the business of fixing things, and it's the right thing to do. I remember Schick used to have a hair dryer, and it broke, and you open it up, and there's a switch. It's a little thing like that, and it costs 25 cents, but they won't send it to you. And now they make it so you can't even open things.
They fix your wagon.
So the right to repair, if you go up on the internet and look at right to repair, there's a great association that can give you all kinds of material, and I'm sure there'll be an update on what's going on in New York State. But you're absolutely correct. Repair is absolutely critical. I grew up in Brooklyn, as you probably know, and one of my jobs, we lived on 23rd Street. Coney Island Avenue was 17 blocks away. My job was to get on the bus with my father's shirts to go to the shirt hustle to redo the collars of a shirt that had a worn-out collar. Unfortunately, those stores don't exist anymore. But you're absolutely correct. Fix it. Well, it was a wartime expression. Use it up. In fact, there's a great book called The Wartime Guide, put out by Popular Science, 1942. Every chapter on how you can do things for yourself, and it concluded, if we can't fix it ourselves, we're going to have to do without, and doing without is not the American way. And it shows you how to repair just about everything in your household. Okay,
What was the name of that, I'm sorry? Wartime what?
Wartime Guide by Popular Science in 1942. I have a copy on my desk. I can say.
Erin Brockovich got famous because there was civil litigation. Lois Gibbs got famous.
Yes.
There was federal litigation, but there was also civil litigation.
Absolutely.
We now have people around the country dying from vaping, and there will be civil litigation, the opioid crisis. Aren't there any lawyers out here?
Well, there are great lawyers out there. I didn't do a survey, but if you need a garbage lawyer, John Moore, M-O-O-R-E, I'll be happy to, I think it's J. Moore, recyclelaw.com.
Where?
He's based in San Francisco, but he works all over the country. I'll get contact with
I'll see
him.
if you want.
Yeah, but civil suits are important. In fact, we're involved in a civil suit. The Institute is involved because, you know, litter on our beaches, it's horrible. There's a group called Save the Albatross Coalition, because the albatrosses are threatened by bottle caps floating on the water, which they eat.
But there's people dying, and there's people dying probably in Warren County from the air pollution.
That's my point. I think if you have a civic center, you should call Mike Ewald, who's a lawyer and wrote the Clean Air Act.
He came here.
Well, I know, Tracy was just telling me. Mike is sensational. We work together a lot. He's an environmentalist, I'm not. We work very well together, and he's sensational, he's dedicated, and he probably charges you 10 cents an hour. Tracy, am I correct?
Yeah, basically, train fare.
Train fare. Right. And that's another thing about Paul Condon. He's been flying all over the world for 30 years, never takes a dime. He needs his plane fare and a bottle of wine when he lands. Now, there were 3 questions here. I'll get to all of you, but I'll start here and go right up there. Sir.
Is there any precedent as far as local legislation for the top end, as far as the way things are packaged and the way merchants sell to reduce waste that way?
One city in the country passed a bottle bill, Columbia, Missouri, and it was very difficult because you could go outside the city and get non-deposit bottles. The state could be tremendous. It could help finance the recycling zones, minimum content. In New York, if you want to sell a newspaper, it should be at least 60% recycled content. Same thing with glass, same thing with plastic, minimum content. There are minimum content laws all over the country. The state could do that. So I would say bottle bills, minimum content, and help get capital. Guaranteed bonds for local government. In fact, there's federal legislation to do that, which we can talk about, but I don't put any faith in federal legislation now for obvious reasons. But the state can be, and I want to point out that in the past years, New York State has been very pro-incineration. You should, any organizer in New York State knows that. They make it, never mind. Let's go here, and this gentleman right here has been very patient.
Yeah, in this county, I'm from another county, I moved here a few years ago, and so my experience is different. In Warren County, and I think probably the same for the other ones, we've got private companies are taking away our trash, okay, and it can't be working efficiently because my rates have gone up 20% the past 2 years. I just happened to see the bill today. Like, it's taken a jump. Going forward, my budgeting as I get older, that's going to be an issue. You know, can't get rid of my trash, can't afford to get rid of it eventually. And have you heard of any counties forcing these basically mafia cabals out of town that own these recycling companies or these trash companies, and single stream, by the way, and making it a countywide thing like we used to in Buffalo and Florida?
It's happening. It happened on Long Island last year. 3 towns adjacent to each other, 605,000 people. Smithtown was one of those towns. They forget the other 2. They got rid of their big haulers and they went back to dual stream. And they're operating very well. Your garbage is going up because the cost of recycling is going up. Because as recycling goes up, the garbage companies, so they can go just a little bit, they'll charge you what the market will bear. So they're raising the cost of recycling because of their own mistakes, so landfill prices are sure to rise.
And county government enters into these contracts
Well,
a lot.
county government can be an angel, it could be the devil.
No, but I'm saying they enter into these contracts a lot, so they can break the contract.
Absolutely. There are even some companies that, some cities that try to break contracts, which is very difficult to do. But all of that has happened. As I said, it's a planning process, and through the planning process, you find out what you need most. And if you need a lawyer, if you need an engineer, and then you pick and choose your consulting team. But the main thing is, you folks have to stay organized because you have to put pressure on your elected officials. You're elected officials and trumpers, aren't they? No. Okay, I'm glad to hear that. But from reading the Adirondack Chronicle and a couple of other newspapers this summer, I get the sense that this is Trump company. However, I read today in the Adirondack criticism of Stefanik, which years ago would never be in the Chronicle, because the Chronicle is run by a right-winger. And I think Stefanik is helping us because she is admitting that the incinerator can't make it. It needs a federal subsidy. And that federal subsidy is not going to be enough. You're going to be the subsidizers, which happens all the time. So you've got to do like the women down in Alachua County did, and up in Pennsylvania. You have to say, Massachusetts, we're never going to vote for you again, and our kids are never going to vote for you again because you're killing us. This incinerator is killing people. Hundreds of pounds of lead and mercury and dioxin, known killers, are being spread. And people will tell you, well, we don't want to, one alternative.
We don't want to put it in the landfill.
Well, one alternative is rail haul, because tomorrow we'll talk about the feasibility of you folks getting your own landfill. But that's a long struggle. But many communities are rail hauling it, and the incineration people say, well, we want to keep everything local. Well, that's crazy. When you burn garbage, you spread it out. It's a landfill in the air. Mikey Ball's term. 400 miles around, you're polluting people, and it, of course, goes even further than that.
The ash goes out of state too.
Yeah. So all of these techniques we can fit and make you a perfect zero waste plan, although I don't like the term, we can talk about that tomorrow. But the point is, you've got to support the people who are doing the plan, help them raise money. United Workers in Baltimore, the city, the incinerator in Baltimore is horrible. Mikey Wall and others got the Clean Air Act done, we hope it'll shut it down, although they're suing. But the key to that was United Workers getting a grant, a community organization, from the community that was threatened the most, Curtis Bay. They were going to build a 4,000 ton per day incinerator in the most polluted zip code in the city. And the citizens mobilized, and they did such a great job. They went to the museums, they went to the colleges, that by the time they got their legislation ready, unanimous votes on the city council. One, to pass a zero waste resolution, two, to pass the Clean Air Act, and now United Workers has enough money, and they just hired a team. I'm one of the team. Gary Liss and Ruth Abbey, Brenda Platt, my colleague, is handling the organics. And that report will be out in 2 weeks. And of course, we'll send it to Tracy and everyone can take a look at it. Now that's 600,000 people. It's going to be different here, but it's going to be different in scale, not in content. Because everything that the Baltimoreans want, no dumping, no illegal dumping, transparency of what's coming out of the incinerator, etc. But the point here is that you need technical people to help put your wishes and dreams into the language of solid waste management. But then you've got to be together, you've got to organize, and you've got to say to any city council or county council that is thinking of building an incinerator or extending the one you have, you'll never vote for them again. And that has to be said very forcefully, and you have to follow through. This gentleman was waiting, and then we'll get to you, sir.
I just wanted to, maybe if you can clarify with us on where you're talking about those two companies, or maybe three companies from San Francisco and maybe Los Angeles and Indianapolis that have computers, what they do again?
Yeah, Indianapolis, the name of the company is Recycle Force, one word, capital R, capital F. Los Angeles is Homeboy, capital H, capital B, one word, Industries, Los Angeles. The two Baltimore companies are Humanum, Humanim, and they do business with another name, I forget it, but Humanum is the company. And the other building deconstruction company is Second Chance, also in Baltimore.
Okay.
And again, if there's any problem reaching these people, just get in touch with me or get in touch with Tracy and we'll get you there. I'll come back to you. Did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, so what they do is they rebuild computers that have been disposed of, and
That's
they
correct.
resell them again?
That's correct. The computers that are donated by businesses, by government, by individuals.
Okay.
Now this gentleman, yes.
If we were going to create a fully circular economy, what products are we going to have to not purchase? You've already mentioned aluminum cans as being one kind of product, very hard to.
Hybrid packages. You know, you get an orange juice gable container. It's beautiful. The paper inside, what's it called? Whatever. $300 a ton. It's pure. It's beautiful. And you put a plastic cap on it, and what do? So hybrid packaging. Now, I mentioned before our consumer. Every major company, from Pepsi to Kraft Foods to Aldi, I have a list of them I could send you. They're all pledging by 2025, some by 2030, to have zero waste packaging. That means recyclable, reusable, compostable. That was not done because they wanted to do it. That was done because of us, our behavior, or political behavior and purchasing it. So they're going to do it. They're still going to fund ALEC to try to get out of it, but we're going to force them to do it. So I would say aluminum cans, hybrid, and some plastics. Plastics is a terrible term because plastics is a perfectly good thing. You can use it hundreds and hundreds of times. But it's the chemicals they put in it, the fixes, Brenda Platt knows more about plastic. But I don't know the names of all the chemicals they put in to have all the characteristics they want, not necessarily us. And remember, we did not ask for one-way bottles. They were just presented to us. So there's a wonderful woman, Alicia Culver, C-U-L-V-E-R.
She used to live in Ithaca, yeah.
Yes, Alicia's a wonderful lady. She runs Responsible Packaging Network. She works with cities and states to show them how to purchase things that are recyclable, reusable, and to avoid dangerous and bad products. And she is only one of several groups that do exactly that. Work with cities to get them to, cities and towns and states to get them to buy the proper equipment. Toners that could be recycled, refurbished, etc. I believe, yes, Miss.
With your full action plan for getting close to zero, minimal, what is the reaction of these waste companies and also materials like polypropylene and plastics that are not currently streamlined? What are your solutions for
Well,
that?
polypropylene, if it's clean, is recyclable and it's valuable. It's number 5, I believe.
So they are recycling that separately?
If they could get it separate from the PET bottle, which is actually it's a lawsuit. The lawsuit that California cities are about to issue through the Save the Albatross Coalition is to require 3 things. One, that the bottle top be tethered to the bottle, so the bottle cap doesn't go out into the ocean and the albatross eats it. Number 2, the bottle cap has to be made out of the same material as the bottle. And 3, cleanups have to be paid for by the companies whose litter is on the beach. And we've done audits. And guess what comes out first? Coca-Cola, Pepsi. That is, I am not a lawyer, I do not know if it's going to win or not, but that's the type of civic action that this gentleman, I believe, refers to.
The part 2 to that question was, so if a municipality jumps on board fully and they are full in, recycle as much as they can, manufacturers accepting polypro and all those things, how do these waste, what do these waste companies do? What is the reaction? And do they jump on board and open their own recycling facilities? What
Well,
happens?
they'll do anything to keep us from driving out of business.
Right.
But the biggest line, which is why I think the term zero waste is both a curse and a blessing. You go, and this happened in Baltimore and Montgomery County the same week. I begged the citizens, and I had any control of Baltimore, but in Montgomery County I said, don't say zero waste. And in fact, I was angry at them because I wrote them a report, and it was how to transition from incinerated, and they changed it to zero waste. And the first thing that happens, they go in and meet their county executive or their head of the DPW in Baltimore, and they say, we want zero waste. We want zero waste, and as soon as we get there, we're going to shut the incinerator. And then what do you say? Well, I say, well, first of all, the official definition of zero waste is 90% diversion, no burning, and only inerts going to landfill. No organics going to landfill. Organics, by the way, are the biggest source of pollution in landfills. The food has water in it, it leaches, leachate, chemicals, and methane. So if you keep your organics out of landfill, you put inerts in and it's safe. So we're never going to get rid of landfilling. So what we want to do is put inerts there. We believe, a lot of us organizers believe, that we could get to 90% with using all these tactics, banning single-use plastics, which is happening all over the country, and other strategies like banning hydrants. You probably can't ban a hybrid package, but you can tax it. And that's what we should do. And then the same thing with bottle lids. Pass a bottle bill. Call for either non-refillables or refillables, but tax the non-refillables. And you'll see it's slow. You know, Stewart's used to have refillables. It's a very interesting case study. I have not done it, but some graduate student should go to their decision to start it and then to stop it. That would be a fascinating study.
Stewart's used to sell milk in glass.
Excuse me, could you repeat that?
Stewart's used to sell milk in glass.
Milk and glass.
Oh, Stewart's used to sell milk in glass?
Yes, well, of course, I'm old enough to remember that. I also remember trolley cars.
Okay, so I grew up in New York,
Yeah.
so that was Burned Dairy. Burned Dairy sold milk in glass, still does,
Yeah.
but I didn't know that Stewart's ever
Well,
did, that was my question.
Well, it's like the fix-it shops that I grew up with. Lamps and vacuum cleaners. There used to be a fix-it shop for all that stuff. It went out of business because the economy changed and purchasing habits changed. All you need is a city to give tax breaks to those businesses so it's easy for them to get into business. People want their stuff fixed. On my webpage now, there's a story by Dan Knapp, who's one of the greatest recycling philosophers we have. It's called Dump Stories. And he started at the Berkeley dump, when the Berkeley dump was dumping garbage in the bay, in the San Francisco Bay, 1960s. And he stopped that. And he learned, he was a professor of sociology, like me, he couldn't stand it, and he became a recycler. And when he did, well, we have much more status than professors. And what he did was, he started talking to people as they backed up their truck and dumped them in, and he said, hey, could I have that? Could I have that? People said, sure. And he learned things. His lesson is, you don't mess with anyone who's throwing stuff out after a divorce. They don't want to talk to you. They want everything destroyed. It's a great read, and it's right on our webpage, ilsr.org/waste2wealth. And by the way, Dan and his wife Mary Lou run Urban Ore. If you ever get to Berkeley, go to Urban Ore. It's a wonderland for recyclers. And there have been many copies since, which is great. Yes,
So you
please.
keep referring to urban, I used to be involved in research organization as recyclers, but really they're reusers, correct? I mean, are you distinguishing, you know, what they did, they take stuff in, they fix it up,
They're
and
not
they resell
recyclers,
it,
they're
it's different than
reusers.
recycling.
That's absolutely correct.
Okay.
Doors,
So there's a-
furniture, but they had to open up a recycling division because people were bringing them stuff that was not reusable, but it was recyclable.
Yeah.
So 5% of their income actually comes from
They actually are
recycling.
doing recycling.
Yeah. And they own 3 acres in Berkeley. They handle 8,000 to 9,000 tons a year. 2% goes to landfill.
Yeah, they're amazing.
It's a great company, and it's a happy place. People come in, bring stuff, they're happy to donate it, and they come out with bargains. It's a wonderful place to hang
And
out.
actually, that's a for, you say donate, isn't that a place where people actually, they get paid? I mean, is that not, isn't it
That's
for
right.
profit? Yeah, Urban Ore, I think it's for profit.
They buy it, some people donate it, some people buy it, and you earn wages, you get your base pay, you get bonuses on the deals you make. If you buy a $400 door for $200, you'll get a bonus. And at the end of the year, all the workers get a bonus based on profits. And right now, they're negotiating because Dan and Mary Lou are getting older, and they're selling the business to their workers, 30, 35 workers. Great model. There's another one near us in DC, community forklift. Same model. But actually, they started dealing in antiques now. Community forklift is now an antique dealer. Sir?
Have you ever tried to reach the Home and Garden TV network, where they're constantly renovating homes, and the first thing they do is take a sledgehammer and destroy perfectly good cabinetry? I do. And they're telling people, you know, this is the popular thing to do. Just smash everything when most of that stuff is as good as I've ever had in my house, and very reusable.
Let me tell you the story. You did a project in Washington, D.C., in the middle of it, taking down public housing. Hundreds, rows and rows of buildings. We hired people from the neighborhood. And we trained them. They started, we had fixing people coming up, getting the steps, getting the stores. It was wonderful. But the biggest thing was that there were 40 or so mostly black men working on this site, which was in the middle of a dangerous neighborhood. And 2 police cars rolled up, and they got out, and they sounded their alarm, and they got out of their car, and they applauded these workers, who, most of them were incarcerated. And the guy, the name happened to be Jackie Robinson, said to me, said, I never knew I could sell something from my neighborhood that was legal. Being that these guys and women, and by the way, we had started with 58, we got down to 49, there was some slippage, but of those 49 workers, 40 of them found jobs immediately after the program in construction. So what you're proposing is not just a waste of material, it's a waste of lives, which is why I say the social aspect of recycling sometimes is worth more than the value of the materials. One last point, you should not worry about the price you're getting from your recyclables when you sell them, because the key is cost avoidance. And I'll give you this one example, and then I'll be happy to say, but it seems like you want me to understand it. Worcester, Massachusetts, in 1993, went to unit pricing and mandatory recycling. It's a city of about 60,000, maybe more now, 70,000. And within 1 year, the recycling jumped up. And since 1993 to now, that's 16, 17 years, they have saved over $100 million cost avoidance, not using an incinerator. The revenue from sales of their materials, maybe 5-6 million. So the key is cost avoidance. Don't worry, recyclables are not going to be worth not as much in the next 10 years as they were in the last 10 years, because the Chinese are out of the market, and the Chinese were driving the market. So we're going to have lower prices, but stable prices, which is exactly what we do. Because the key is keeping the stuff out of incinerators and landfills. I believe you had a question, Ms.?
Well, I noticed here that the DEC is collecting comments, public comments until September 20th. If they go, before they decide whether or not to renew this, the trash burning plant's air permit, if they go ahead and renew that, is the game lost? No.
Oh, no. No.
There are other ways to close the incinerator.
Okay.
If you want to find out, get involved with their group.
Okay.
Yes.
And we'll find out more about that
And we'll
tomorrow.
be,
Yeah.
and we will be, you know, we are a little late in the game in terms of doing some draft comments to share, because we did not know that in the future, we're going to be looking into the future and seeing when air permits need to be renewed, but this is our first time that we've made comments on Lehigh, but we knew that was coming. But this we didn't know about, so we were thinking the organizing this event and doing some other internal things. So we will be coming out early next week with, and if everyone here wants to make one comment on the air permit, make a comment that says we want an extension for 2 months. So make that comment and we will
extend the public
Yes.
comments
Yes.
to.
Yes.
Just Google DEC Warren, what do we do?
No,
to
okay,
make our comments?
so everyone here is going to get an email tomorrow that will say, here's who you make your comments to, ask for an extension. So do that immediately, and you will get some draft comments early next week with some guidance on what key things. We've been trying different angles to get some guidance. One of the things that we're going to be asking for, and this is not necessary, well, one of the things we're going to be asking for is continuous emission monitoring. Because right now you get a report like years later of what they, based on a one-day air test. How indicative is that of actual conditions on a daily basis? It ain't. They burn tires, especially in the winter, because the garbage is wet. We're not getting air tests of burning of tires. We're getting air tests under the best conditions. So we're asking for continuous emissions monitoring, and we'll be putting that language together. And you will get that, and you can ask for it, but we're really looking for someone with technical ability to, and we could find that, but we needed more advance notice. But closing the incinerator is not going to happen because it's the air permit. If you're waiting for that to happen, it's not going to happen. This is like kind of an automatic renewal, I believe. But it will lay the groundwork for other activities that could close the incinerator.
Oh,
And remember, the incinerator is 28 years old. The average lifespan is 31 years. This incinerator is going to close. And anyone in political office needs to realize that we are at a time that we need to come up with alternative solutions, because this incinerator is not going to be here for another 20 years. It ain't. So, you know.
If I could say, in Baltimore, excuse me, we had the city and the state were impossible. Mike Lewald, we mentioned, excuse me, working with organized communities, he put the Clean Air Act saying, even if it's a private incinerator, if you don't meet these conditions in our city, you can't burn garbage. And that's the key. If it's privately owned, which yours is, you can't keep garbage out of it. Only if a private landfill or a private incinerator is immune from local laws because of one stupid thing, and that is that the courts say that garbage is commerce. Commerce clause of the Constitution. So we need a very simple amendment to the Constitution. 4 words. Garbage is not commerce. And then we could tell these companies to do what we want. Thank you very much.